We need to add a dial plan component for voicemail. Let's look at incoming calls to voicemail. Here's the Enterprise 20 configuration. We'll look at the individual components in sequence. The voicemail pilot should be a DID number, not a phantom number. The voicemail pilot has a calling search space, not a partition. The voicemail profile is associated with a voicemail pilot. All voicemail numbers are 8 digits, so we apply an 8-digit mask, XXX, XXXX. We have a hunt pilot that corresponds to the voicemail pilot. The hunt pilot is in a partition. The hunt pilot partition must be in the voicemail pilot calling search space. In our case, internal partition must be in Enterprise 20 internal no 911 calling search space. And it is. And it must be in the gateway calling search space. In our case, internal partition must be in Enterprise internal no 911 calling search space. And it is. Here's the Enterprise 20 Hunt Pilot configuration. The Hunt Pilot points to a hunt list. We check the For Voicemail Usage checkbox. We're not sure what that does, but we check it. The hunt list points to a line group. The line group includes our voicemail ports. Voicemail ports have directory numbers. No one should be calling these numbers. Calls to voicemail should always go through the Hunt Pilot. We use Phantom Site 100 for voicemail-related numbers. We put the directory numbers for the voicemail ports in the No Access partition. Take a second look at the summary drawing. This is not hard to understand or configure. We also have outgoing calls from voicemail. Calls may come from a voicemail system for a number of reasons, such as transfers and outdialing for notifications. We also need to consider message waiting indicators. Message waiting indicators turn your light on and off when you receive and listen to your voicemail messages. We need to accept calls to these numbers from our voicemail ports. We use 9990 and 9991 in the MWI partition. Why a separate partition? We don't want users to be able to turn MWI indicators off and on themselves. Nothing good can come of that. The MWI partition will not be included in calling search spaces other than for voicemail ports. We can control destinations for calls coming from our CUC voicemail system in 2 places. We can use the CUCM voicemail calling search spaces, we can use CUC restriction tables, or we can use a combination of the 2. CUCM voicemail calling search spaces control calls from our voicemail system for all users. There are 2 calling search spaces, so we can use the line device model. CUC restriction tables are not as flexible as CUCM calling search spaces. It's easy enough to block international calling, but not so easy to block high-risk country and area codes. On the CUCM, we did this. We used Toronto 55 unrestricted no 911 calling search space on the device. We created a new calling search space for the line voicemail port calling search space containing the block restricted partition and the MWI partition. Here's the configuration of an Enterprise 20 voicemail port. Let's look at the final fixes for our call forwarding dial plan. The scenario we looked at for Enterprise 20 has these requirements for call forwarding. Whatever we do, it had better be easy to explain to our users. We'll never allow call forwarding to E911. Some users expect to configure forward all, forward busy, and forward no answer destinations themselves. We will allow call forwarding to local numbers in all cases. We will allow call forwarding to long distance numbers if the user has to log in to configure the destination. Remember that our long distance class of service blocks high-risk area codes. And we need to configure lines differently for different kinds of users. Because we only have a single calling search space for most forwarding conditions, our options for restricting destinations are not great. We have internal, enterprise internal no 911 calling search space, or XXX internal no 911 calling search space, and unrestricted XXX unrestricted no 911 calling search space. The first case doesn't meet our requirements for local destinations. The second case allows forwarding to anywhere. We chose XXX unrestricted no 911 calling search space because it meets our requirements and needs no extra configuration. We assumed the toll fraud risk is low because users must be logged in. Remember, this is what the Cisco Unified CM Administration directory number page looks like for a Montreal DN. The forward all calling search space is temporarily set to line unrestricted calling search space for testing. Our objectives and the results from our deployment do not match. We cannot restrict call forwarding destinations as desired. What should we do? How hard could it be to fix this? We have all the patterns we need. We have all the partitions we need. We can restrict call forwarding destinations by creating site-specific call forwarding calling search spaces that can be used by themselves. For XXX Forward International No 911 calling search space, for each site, copy the site-specific unrestricted No 911 calling search space, giving it a new name. Insert the block restricted partition before the NANP partition. For XXX Forward Long Distance No 911 calling search space for each site, copy the site-specific XXX Forward International No 911 calling search space, giving it a new name. Insert the block international partition before the block restricted partition. For XXX Forward Local No 911 calling search space for each site, copy the site-specific XXX Forward Long Distance No 911 calling search space, giving it a new name. Insert the block long distance partition before the block international partition. We'll also create a site-specific calling search space for forwarding to unrestricted numbers, and a site-specific calling search space for forwarding to internal numbers. Why would we do this? We're just giving the same calling search space two names. We copied these calling search spaces to have a complete set of forwarding calling search spaces for call forwarding configuration. Phone administrators now have clear and simple options for all calling search space configuration. Device and device pool calling search spaces use a site-specific unrestricted calling search space. Line calling search spaces use a line calling search space. And forwarding and rerouting calling search spaces use a forwarding calling search space. We'll talk about rerouting calling search spaces in our drawing Dial Plan for Mobility. Site-specific unrestricted calling search spaces are used for devices and device pools. Administrators have two choices: XXX unrestricted calling search space for phones, and the XXX unrestricted No 911 calling search space for soft phones and clients. Line calling search spaces are used for lines. There are only 5 choices: line internal calling search space, line local calling search space, line long distance calling search space, line international calling search space, and line unrestricted calling search space. Use a site-specific forward calling search space for call forwarding and rerouting calling search spaces. There are only 5 choices for each site. For example, for Montreal 57, Montreal 57 Forward Internal No 911 calling search space, Montreal 57 Forward Local No 911 calling search space, Montreal 57 Forward Long Distance No 911 calling search space, Montreal 57 Forward International No 911 Calling Search Space, and Montreal 57 Forward Unrestricted No 911 Calling Search Space. This is what the Cisco Unified CM Administration directory number page looks like for a Montreal DN with our final fixes and the destinations initially set to go to voicemail. We've added 5 calling search spaces for each site. It took us 45 minutes to add these for all 10 sites. We were watching Fareed Zakaria, and so we were a bit distracted. Now we have 9 site-specific calling search spaces. Some sites have extra calling search spaces for global transformations. 9 calling search spaces per site? That's crazy talk. We don't think so. The Enterprise 20 objective was not deploy the smallest number of patterns, partitions, and calling search spaces mathematically possible, or create a dial plan that takes the least amount of time to deploy. The CUCM is a collaboration product. The whole point is to facilitate collaboration within the enterprise and with customers and partners. We can facilitate collaboration by maximizing the chance of calls being successful. If our users can make themselves more reachable with a flexible self-service call forwarding scheme, then we can pat ourselves on the back. That's what we implemented. We made things easy for users to understand. See our drawing, Dial Plan End User Training. And we made it easy for phone administrators to manage. Coming up next, Enterprise 20 Dial Plan Build, Dial Plan for Mobility. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.